The highly anticipated Edo State governorship election has come and gone. The process has been described by many as free, fair, and credible. But the main opposition party in the state, the All Progressives Congress, has rejected the results. As attention now shifts to the Ondo elections, which is now about 2 weeks away, what are the lessons learned from the Edo State governorship election? Let's find out. Welcome to Hard Copy. My name is Terry Ikumi. My first guest is Hassan, Director, Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, which was the first to roll out observations from the election. Later, I'll speak with a representative of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Hassan, welcome to Hard Copy, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Terry.
And it's nice to see you resting. I mean, I can understand how stressful it was for you to go through the Kogi election and then anticipate something similar in the Edo election. Was it what you anticipated?
I think that the Edo elections is actually taking away the bitter experience from Kogi. Not perfectly, but at least the violence, the apprehension that we personally felt as observers during the Kogi elections. Edo has been an improvement in terms of what happened on elections day. It's not like it's perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And we are very positive. So all the accolades that is coming for Edo is not oblivious of the challenges that were raised or challenges encountered in the elections. But the fact that as a collective, as a citizen, together we were able to make something that looks very bad, like 90, 100% forecast of like, this is going to be a violent election, into a almost peaceful elections.
What do you think was responsible for that?
Several things are actually responsible for that. One, of course, is the peace negotiated by the Oba of Benin. If you understand, in Edo, the traditional institution means a lot. The Abdisalami Abubakar-led peace committee, the statement of the President Muhammadu Buhari also contributed, and importantly, the fact that the Independent National Electoral Commission tried its best in terms of organizing this election credibly, and importantly, the non-partisan action of the Nigerian security agencies. So that is what really determines this election. Those 5 points. The fact that we did not see, so assuming a point where we had seen in previous elections that the security forces were openly deployed or actively participated in skewing outcome in broad daylight, it would have degenerated into violence. So I think I give kudos to the security agencies in this election. We are not saying there weren't challenges, but when we see positive, we also recognize those positives. So I'm not going to forget that our observers were detained. Several organizations' observers were also detained. But at least the non-partisanship they displayed in these elections is not comparable to the previous elections since 2019.
The CDD also mentioned that the voter turnout was quite low, 25.2% if I'm correct. What do you think was responsible for that? Because it seemed at the time that there were fears about the violence, as you rightly mentioned, and then the Oba stepped in, the IG of police assured the people, and then from conversations we had with the people in Edo State, it did seem that they were going to come out en masse and vote, but that wasn't the case. What happened?
Now, lots of reasons are actually responsible for low voter turnout. One is the failure of democracy itself to actually deliver development. So tell me, even if you ask our colleagues, friends, family, they'll tell you that why do I have to go under the scorching sun in the rain to vote when public goods and services are not available? So that's one. Secondly, of course, is often the fear of violence drives people away from participating in elections. Now, thirdly, is also the belief that votes will not count. So somehow it has been ingrained in people. And that was something that we had mentioned in our pre-election reports issued last Thursday, that voter apathy will likely be driven by the fear that votes will not count, because that was what we got from speaking to people.
Do you think that votes counted in this election?
I think that vote counted because if you look at it, at times perception actually matters when you are managing elections. In some elections, if votes did not count or the will of the people is not reflected. There could have been an outbreak of violence instead of the joyous mood you saw in different parts of Edo State.
So do you commend the Independent National Electoral Commission for the way it handled this election?
I think that to a reasonable extent they tried their best, irrespective of the challenge of logistics, which continues to mar elections, the non-payments of ad hoc staff, which is a recurring issue. So we note those two issues.
Yeah, in one of your reports, you mentioned that that was one of the reasons why there was a delay in arrival of INEC officials.
And the inability to implement the COVID-19 protocol. Yes, and we do stand by it, because the late arrival in some places, by 9 a.m., they were still at the rack. And what causes this? The late arrival of vehicles to move people and officials, all this contribute. And this late arrival led to the inability to implement the COVID-19 protocol. Now, COVID-19 protocol is not just about wearing masks, because somehow in Nigeria we have actually reduced it to the wearing of masks, which was what we saw as partial compliance on Saturday, 19th September. There were meant to be clear indicators of where everybody will stand, disinfection of the unit, use of hand sanitizers, all those processes.
Those indicators were not made available.
There were actually no indicators, because people were arriving. So we had posited that if they had to implement the COVID-19 protocol, it would have been impossible to finish the election by 2:30. There would have been a possibility to extend it into the early hours of the day, if possible. But again, aside from INEC not doing that, which we frown at, because this is very important, elections and health implications. You can't say because of elections we are going to jettison health implication. But Nigerians also did not help. So it was just like, even where they tried to actually implement that, you saw citizens were not interested. We even had instances where our observers reported that citizens were again borrowing face masks to participate in the elections, aside from the sharing
did your observers find that it was a prerequisite for voting?
Yes, people knew. So earlier on, INEC has been explicit with it: no face masks, no voting. They have had voter education
at the polls.
At the polls, and the politicians reacted to it by providing face mask for people. So you even see that face mask was used as a means to identify who is going to pay you after you have voted. It was to implement, it was part of the vote buying strategy also itself. So you are wearing yellow marks, you know which party you are actually for. So it was part of it. So it was.
Let's stay on that now, because you also reported that it became worrisome even more because you have discovered a new tactic. You discovered a new tactic that the politicians employed now. In fact, even more worrying was the fact that young girls were now being used to sell votes. How did this play out?
I think that the structured vote buying that we've witnessed in the Edo elections is unprecedented. They were proxy, like 4 levels, 4 layers. So this is, you've identified A directs you to B directs you to C, D is the last end where you collect the money. There is issuing of tickets, there is photo evidence which you have to put, there is assistance.
So that suggests that people went to the polls with their phones.
Yes,
and there is pictures of their
yes, there is even assisted voting where that was not implemented also. So you see, they just watch and make sure you thumbprint if they are not even directly actually thumbprinting for you. And the instance where they used the girls was where people were already frowning at it. So one thing that they had to do was to use young girls as proxies to carry money, because you would not suspect them, compared to having a Terry or a diet and being the one that is actually ferrying this money. This structured vote buying is something that is unprecedented and not seen. And I think that if it happened in Edo, we have to take it serious. Because since the return to, since 2015 elections, the first, 2016 actually, Edo heralded the beginning of vote buying, as in extreme vote buying post 2015. And this is, so if we are tracing vote buying, we always come to Edo to say this was, Edo 2016 was the beginning of the unprecedented vote buying. And you can see the same as played out with now not just vote buying, but a structured approach to vote buying. And I think these are worrying when vote buying is now determining the outcome of an election.
And as you rightly pointed out during your statement, while reading out your statement, the security agencies stood by and did nothing.
I think that is one of the undoing of the security agencies. And without mincing word, while we continue to applaud them for their non-partisanship, the failure to implement extant laws breeds impunity. So the political class were buying votes with impunity. The citizens were complying and even looking that who is paying more. One is paying 3,000, another is paying 5,000. You leave the queue and go to queue for 5,000. And right there in broad daylight, the security forces, some present, heavily deployed, average of 3-4. So in previous elections, when we talk, we will say we go to polling unit, we didn't see the 3, we didn't see the 4, they should explain the 31,000 they've deployed. This time around, you wouldn't find people saying explain 31,000 because we do not expect to see all the 31,000, but we want to see like 3-4
presence at least, yeah,
in the polling unit. And this was there. But somehow, they just turned the other eyes. And so hardly do we have cases of anybody arrested for vote buying, even though there were a few cases of people arrested for other electoral offenses.
It's quite clear that Edo State election threw up a number of challenges, brought up a number of lessons as well that should be learned. What do you think, if you point fingers at all the players involved in electioneering, how do we distribute the responsibilities in a manner that an Ondo State election does better than the Edo State election?
I think that the responsibilities are actually clear, and it starts with President Muhammadu Buhari. First and foremost, we want him to make a statement again to talk about his non-partisanship and that the vote of the people will count immediately. In fact, before the end of the week, ahead of this Ondo election, because it's also another 10th elections. But because we are all focused on Edo, we are not seeing and talking much about what is happening on Ondo. But in the next couple of days, we'll be releasing reports to give an idea of what is happening in Ondo. So President Muhammadu Buhari has a role to play. Then the Peace Committee, who have actually been effective, will also have to have a peace pact, not few days into the elections, but as soon as possible, and ensure that there is a monitoring of the implementation of these parts, not just parts as in part's sake, really. Now, importantly, if INEC, what they have two responsibilities we have actually laid on them at the CDD ahead of the Ondo elections, aside from managing logistics, which is their primary responsibility, ensuring that they implement their COVID-19 policy, policy on conducting elections during COVID-19. Now, it's important to actually acclaim them that they were the first in West Africa to come out with a policy. But there is a difference with having a policy and implementing the policy. So these elections, they must ensure that they work with NCDC to ensure that this policy is implemented while working on voter education to turn out the votes, as well as ensure that people adhere to the COVID-19 policy when they come to the poll. Now the security agents, they've been all, now they are being acclaimed, and we recognize their contribution to the just concluded elections, but they should continue with build on what was done on this Saturday 19th September elections and ensure they remain largely non-partisan in the forthcoming elections. But while remaining non-partisan, ensure that they implement the law as written or provided for in our law books. And most importantly, aside from voting in elections, it's high time that we have to start holding our elected officials accountable.
I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Idayat Hassan, Director of Center for Democracy and Development. Thank you so much for the work you do, and I hope you find some time to rest now, at least before the Ondo elections.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. When we come back, we'll speak with the electoral umpire and get responses for the observations made by the CSOs. Do stay with us.